Welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you're over 60, you might have glanced in the mirror recently and noticed something incredibly frustrating. Your waistline is expanding. And honestly, the most maddening part, you haven't changed a single thing. You're eating the exact same foods, doing the exact same activities that kept you perfectly in shape in your 40s and 50s. I totally get how disheartening that can be, but today we are going to unpack exactly why this is happening.
I really want to validate that frustration right out of the gate. Your expanding waistline is absolutely not a failure of your willpower. It doesn't mean you've just stopped caring, and it's certainly not some simple cosmetic annoyance you just have to live with. What you're experiencing is a profound, universal biological shift that comes with aging. Your body is fundamentally changing how it operates from the inside out.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap. We'll start by covering the belly fat shift, why our biology changes so much after 60, the very real threat of visceral fat, how to accurately measure your risk, and most importantly, concrete strategies to reclaim your health.
All right, starting with Section 1, the belly fat shift. As we cross into our 60s, the body completely rewires how and where it decides to store fat.
You see, not all fat is created equal. There's a really stark contrast here. The fat we usually obsess over when looking in the mirror is subcutaneous fat. That's the soft, pinchable stuff right beneath the skin. Medically speaking, it's relatively harmless. But what happens after 60 is this rapid accumulation of visceral fat. This is deeply hidden, dangerous fat that packs itself tightly inside your abdominal cavity, literally wrapping around and infiltrating your liver, your pancreas, and your intestines. It's actually what pushes the belly out from the inside.
Moving right along to Section 2, why biology changes after 60. Because this rapid accumulation isn't just about moving a little less. It's a cascade of internal physiological shifts.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the complete hormonal takeover happening in your body. For women, the precipitous drop in estrogen at menopause removes a natural suppression system, which fundamentally shifts fat storage away from the hips and thighs straight to the abdomen. For men, a progressive decline in testosterone lowers your metabolic rate and ramps up cortisol activity, driving that exact same belly fat accumulation. Throw sarcopenia into the mix, that progressive loss of muscle mass as we age, and your body just loses its capacity to dispose of glucose. This means the literal exact same calories that maintained your weight at 50 are now being stored as fat at 65.
And we absolutely can't ignore the stress-fat connection here. Visceral fat depots actually have a much higher density of receptors for cortisol, which is your body's primary stress hormone. This means elevated cortisol, whether from the chronic stress of aging, social isolation, or especially poor sleep, directly signals your body to aggressively store visceral fat. And this happens entirely independent of how many calories you're eating. Think about that. Even just a few nights of bad sleep can physically signal your body to expand your waistline.
That brings us to Section 3, the visceral fat threat. We need to shift completely away from vanity right now, because this tissue is a very serious medical reality.
Let's completely redefine what fat actually is. Visceral fat is not just some passive storage unit for extra calories, okay? It is a highly active endocrine organ. Think of it like a toxic factory operating 24/7 inside your belly, just pumping out inflammatory cytokines. This drives a systemic state of what we call inflammaging throughout your entire body.
Just picture how this toxic factory attacks your major organs. First up, your liver. Because visceral fat drains directly into the portal vein, your liver is continuously bathed in these inflammatory chemicals, which is a massive driver of fatty liver disease. For your heart, this fat actively promotes arterial plaque and cranks up your blood pressure. Up in the brain, these inflammatory chemicals cross the blood-brain barrier, driving neuroinflammation that significantly increases the risk of dementia. And finally, the elevated insulin created by this visceral fat can directly stimulate the growth of cancer cells. It's a full-on systemic threat. Which leads us to Section 4, how to measure your risk. We really need a total paradigm shift in how we assess our health going forward.
So the crucial point is this: 35 inches for women and 40 inches for men. In fact, do yourself a favor and just use your bathroom scale as a doorstop. Throw away that standard BMI metric entirely. Two people can have the exact same BMI but completely different amounts of dangerous visceral fat. A simple tape measure around your waist is a clinically validated tool. If your waist circumference is above these numbers, you have a visceral fat crisis that needs addressing, and it is entirely independent of what that scale on your floor says.
Beyond just the tape measure, your doctor should really be looking at precision medical testing. Your waist-to-height ratio is an incredible, free tool you can use right now. Just divide your waist by your height.
Anything above 0.5 indicates elevated risk. A DEXA scan is fantastic because it precisely maps exactly where your fat is distributed. And crucially, you have to watch your blood markers. Things like elevated triglycerides, fasting insulin, and high-sensitivity CRP are basically the chemical footprints of visceral fat buildup.
All right, now for the good news in Section 5, Strategies to Reclaim Health. We have 8 proven strategies tailored specifically for this.
The very first thing we have to accept is that standard weight loss rules fundamentally fail older adults. You just cannot simply eat less and move more like you did at 40. The rules of your biology have changed. So, we need a specific biological toolkit designed exclusively for bodies over 60.
Let's start with strategy number 1, combining a modest calorie deficit with a high protein target. We're talking about just 300 to 500 fewer calories a day, but here's the key. 30 to 35% of your total calories must come from high-quality protein. Why? Well, if you just cut calories blindly after 60, you're going to lose precious muscle mass. This specific protein-heavy composition melts visceral fat while actively preserving the skeletal muscle that keeps your metabolism fired up.
And this brilliantly illustrates strategies 2 and 3, the exercise formula. Notice it requires 2 distinct pillars. You need 150 to 200 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise, like brisk walking or maybe some swimming, because that adrenaline surge specifically mobilizes and shrinks those visceral fat depots. But you absolutely must pair that with resistance training. Lifting weights rebuilds that skeletal muscle to expand your body's ability to process glucose safely. Trust me, neither of these works perfectly without the other.
Strategies 4, 5, and 6 all revolve around turning off the biological alarm bells in your body. We have to shut down that cortisol and inflammation. First, optimize your sleep. Treat sleep as a profound metabolic intervention that lowers fat-storing cortisol. Second, actively manage your stress with mind-body practices to calm your nervous system. And third, adopt a low-glycemic, anti-inflammatory Mediterranean diet. Ditching the refined carbs and focusing on olive oil, fiber, and omega-3s directly shuts off the inflammatory signals telling your belly to store fat.
Strategy 7 is honestly an incredible biological hack: time-restricted eating. This simply means limiting all your food consumption to an 8 to 10 hour window, say between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. By doing this, you give your body a nice, long overnight fasting period. This dramatically resets your insulin sensitivity and completely aligns your digestion with your circadian rhythms. Astoundingly, studies show this burns visceral fat even if you don't change the total number of calories you're eating. How wild is that? Our final strategy is exploring medical and hormonal support. Look, for appropriate candidates, addressing a significant decline in estrogen or testosterone with a physician can be a legitimate, evidence-based medical tool. Hormone replacement therapy definitely isn't for everyone, but when your visceral fat is being driven primarily by a severe hormonal cliff, it is absolutely a conversation worth having with a knowledgeable doctor.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but I want to leave you with this really empowering reminder. Belly fat after 60 is not a cosmetic problem. It's a medical one. But it is entirely modifiable. In fact, visceral fat is actually more responsive to intervention than that pinchable fat under your skin. By applying these specific biology-based strategies, it is literally never too late to clear out that toxic factory and reclaim your metabolic health. So my question to you is, which of these 8 strategies are you going to implement first to start taking back your health tomorrow?